Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my podcast. I'm Adrian Lloyd. This is just my stupid opinion. Today, we got to talk about the Las Vegas shooting that happened on Sunday night, which was the 1st of October. Now, everybody by now has heard about it because it's been everywhere. It's been labeled as one of the worst, the worst gun massacre in U.S. history. I can't remember exactly how long, but it's probably only been about a year and a half or so ago when there was the shooting in Orlando, Florida. That one was labeled as the worst massacre in U.S. history, and that one had about 49 people dead, if I remember, and I think 150 people wounded, and that one was labeled the worst at the time. This one was to a much higher degree. So we're going to jump into this story and see what happened. So the Mandalay Bay Hotel and Casino, where a lone gunman perched at a 32nd floor window, opened fire on a crowd of thousands. Police say at least 59 people were killed and more than 527 were injured in the attacks. The shooter, who has been identified as Stephen Paddock, also died at the scene. It's believed Paddock checked into a room on the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Hotel and Casino on Thursday. On Sunday night, just after 10 p.m. local time, he began shooting from the window of his room to a crowd gathering a music festival across the street. SWAT teams from the Las Vegas police were able to breach Paddock's room and found him dead. Many in the crowd of 22,000 country music fans didn't understand what was happening when the band stopped playing and the singer Jason Aldean bolted off the stage. There were actually a number of Canadians in the crowd at the time, and a pair of them was Quinwell Cobb and his wife Madison Milford. And according to them, they said that they heard the first few shots and then everybody was just looking around confused. There was a moment where everything stopped, and then the gunfire began again, and that's when everyone realized the problem. And then you can hear the screams, everybody running, people starting to get hit, people starting to scream. I remember I watched this video a lot, mostly because I was trying to see where the shooting was coming from. And it kind of sticks with you. Just as I was watching it, you hear. I heard one woman specifically who, in the video, even though the video wasn't pointed at her, you could hear that she got hit and she started to scream in pain, and that was a pretty chilling audio. So this Canadian, Quinwell Cobb, he ended up saying that he said, quote, "We heard a bunch of pops in quick succession. Everybody was kind of startled around us, but nobody thought it was anything but firecrackers or something like that, so everybody just ignored it. Everybody clued in quickly when the second barrage of bullets started. There was a gentleman behind us who said, 'That's gunfire. Everybody get down.'" He says that the man behind him pointed out that the gunshots were coming from the hotel, but the echoes off the building made it hard to be sure. It sounded like it was coming from everywhere. So yeah, as you saw, everybody got confused, and then as the pop, pop, pop noise resumed, the pure terror set in. Quote, "People started screaming and yelling, and we started running," said Andrew Akiyoshi, who provided the cell phone video to the Associated Press. You could feel the panic. You could feel like the bullets were flying above us, everybody ducking down low to the ground." End quote. While some concertgoers hit the ground, others pushed for the crowded exits, shoving through narrow gates and climbing over fences at 40 to 50 round bursts of automatic weapon fire rained down on them from the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Casino Hotel. By Monday afternoon, 59 were dead and 527 were injured in the deadliest mass shooting in modern U.S. history. And actually, one thing it says on there is that console goers hit the ground. In a situation like this, while you want to get low during gunfire, getting on the ground and staying there is not a good idea in a situation like this. You get down initially because you're trying to avoid gunfire, sure, but a lot of people ended up staying where they were. It seemed that they froze in place. Of course, it's a scary situation to be in, so it's quite possible that that's what it was. They were just freezing up in the moment. But this is one of the worst situations you can be in because you are just a sitting duck at that moment. You have nothing to defend yourself with. You don't know where the shooting is coming from. And you're sitting there in the open on the ground. There were, of course, many ended up seeking cover, but there were many that just seemed to lay in the middle of the ground, and I wonder how many of them eventually got killed just because they possibly froze up in that moment. It's also been confirmed that there were Canadian victims who were both injured and killed in this situation. According to one article from CBC, it talks about how 2 women from Alberta and a BC man were among those that were killed in this massacre that happened. And we still have 4 that are missing, and at least according to at least yesterday to this article, it said 1 remains missing. So the man from BC was Jordan McGilden of Maple Ridge. He would have celebrated his 24th birthday on Friday. Now his parents have headed to Nevada to retrieve his body. McGilden's grandmother, Anne Norman, told CTV Vancouver that her grandson was the only child with a big heart who worked hard, loved his family, and looked after his girlfriend. A U.S. woman said in a post on Facebook, actually, that McGilden died in her arms. And this was Heather Goose, and we can see here through her tweet that this poor young man from BC who was just down to watch a concert got gunned down. And for no reason, as far as we can tell. We'll get a little more into that in just a minute once we get through these details, but all in all, this was a very senseless killing. There doesn't really seem to be much of a motive behind it. Also along the dead, we have Jessica Klimchuk, who was from Valley View, Alberta, and she was also killed in the attack. The Holy Family Catholic Regional Division issued a statement Monday expressing shock and sadness at Klimchuk's death. The school division said Klimchuk worked as an educational assistant, librarian, and bus driver for the St. Stephen's School in Valley View. And there's also been another woman from BC, but she has not yet been publicly identified. According to this article, I still haven't found anything identifying her, but if one of you out there watching this happens to find something, let me know. 2 friends, Jan Lambourne and Jody Anself, were injured in this attack. Lambourne was hit in the abdomen and underwent surgery, while her friend was sent to a hospital with a wound in the arm. And the story goes on to say about how Lambourne's husband ended up just receiving a text out of the blue just from her saying that she loved him and that she had been shot. I can't imagine that fear that must have gripped his heart in that moment. Out of the blue, you think your wife is down in America having a good time with her friend at a concert, and then you get this text that she's been shot. You flip on the news, and suddenly you hear of 59 people dead, I believe it was. 59 people dead, more than 500 injured. The good news on that, though, is while Lambourne was originally listed as critical, she has been stabilized as of now, so I think she's going to be okay. So now we move on to the shooter. Now, this is where things get weird about this guy. He doesn't fit your typical shooter that you hear about. He was a 64-year-old man, and he did pretty well for himself. As we're going to see in a couple articles we got here, that his brother, when speaking to the press about this, said that how shocked they were that this guy Stephen Paddock could do this, that his brother could do this, but also talked about how his brother was wealthy, that he didn't have there was nothing in his day-to-day life that would suggest that he would become a shooter. He lived in Mesquite, Nevada, and it's a town about an hour and a half or so outside of Las Vegas, where he lived with his 62-year-old girlfriend. And from what we do know so far about this whole situation, because again, there's a lot of confusion going around and a lot of fake news that's being pushed right now about this whole situation. So trying to figure out exactly who this guy is and what his motivations were is difficult right now. What we do know is Paddock was a 64-year-old. The cast majority of mass shooting terrorists ranged in age from late teens to early 40s. So again, he doesn't match the description in this way. He had plenty of material possessions, including 2 homes and 2 planes. Though as a high-stakes gambler, there's no telling what his current financial state is until police release that information. Neighbors and acquaintances generally felt he was unexceptional with his interactions. He was private and aggressively unfriendly, but still spent time going to concerts, golfing, and working out in public. Police have no investigative history about him. The last communication Paddock had with his brother was inquiring about their mother, who had lost power during Hurricane Irma, and that authorities had seized 30 firearms between his hotel room and home. So as we can see, this guy was armed to the teeth and apparently wasn't planning to go out without a fight. Amongst these, he had a couple of assault rifles mounted on tripods, actually. And he was found in his room with thousands of rounds of ammunition. So this guy came to do more damage than he did, and he did enough damage. But yeah, going back to his brother is very confused by why he did this. His brother Eric Paddock ended up saying that his brother Stephen was just a guy and seemed to have no political leanings of any kind. Quote, no affiliation, no religion, no politics. He never cared about any of that stuff, end quote. He was just a guy who had money, he went on cruises and gambled. So this guy sounded like he had a better life than the average person, than you or me. But what leads somebody to go and then shoot up a concert of thousands of people, injuring hundreds? But yeah, Eric goes on to talk about his brother, saying that he was a multi-millionaire. Quote, he had substantial wealth. He'd tell me when he'd win. He groused and then he lost. He never said he had lost $4 million or something. I think he would have told me. So it's possible that gambling was involved. Maybe he gambled away and lost a lot, and he lost everything, and just, I don't know. They also said that he was aggressively unfriendly, so maybe he just wanted to go out with a bang. It's really unclear right now as to why this guy did it. But a few other things that we can guarantee is that the FBI has stated that there is no connection between Paddock and any international terrorist organization. This is related, they say this because ISIS has laid claim that he is a soldier of theirs, recruited months ago, and that he carried out this attack in the name of Islam. But FBI and CIA have been unable to connect him to this group or any radical Muslim group. They're pretty sure he wasn't a Muslim, actually. So why is ISIS taking claim for this? Probably just to try and make themselves more relevant, because ISIS is kind of in a shithole right now, not doing so well. And to the more terrorist attacks they could claim for themselves, the better. Makes them still feared by the West. And there have been plenty of times in the past where other groups will do things like this. They'll try and jump on and take credit for an attack that they didn't do, and they do it because they're trying to make themselves seem more relevant than they actually are, bigger than they actually are, scarier than they actually are. So this is probably the real reason that ISIS laid their claim as him being a soldier of theirs. Because if ISIS could get credit for the worst mass killing in modern U.S. history, that would be a big win for them. His friends and family said that they have no knowledge of him having any involvement with religion, or even, for that case, radical religion. So it's very unlikely that that's the motivator. We don't know right now. In the end, we don't know right now what is the reason that this man went out and shot up hundreds of people. When asked about it, the Las Vegas police sheriff Joseph Lombardo ended up saying that he can't get into the mind of a psychopath at this point, and that he wasn't on their radars, and just that they don't know. So as terrible as it is, that's really where we're kind of left with. Maybe it's this guy's life. Maybe he had a rough life that people aren't really aware of, and it's the way he was brought up or something. Because one thing we do know about him, and this came out after he committed the shooting, was that his father was a bank thief. He was a bank thief, and he tried to run down an FBI agent back in the 1960s. He ended up getting arrested at his home in front of his children and his wife. His son, this guy, Steven, was 7 at the time, so old enough to be aware what's going on, old enough to remember, so we don't know how much of an impact this had, watching his father get dragged away and probably figuring out the type of man that his father really is. His father had already previously been to jail for con games, writing up bad checks, and a few other different fraudulent acts. From the descriptions of the type of personality traits that his father had, it seemed that their father, Benjamin Paddock, was a manipulator. Arrogant, full of himself, smooth talking. Few other, but also just very manipulative characteristics. So, and if he's anything like his father, this guy, Stephen Paddock, then he might have had those qualities too. I don't know if it really plays a factor into what happened, but in terms of the arrest, Benjamin Paddock was arrested in July 28, 1960 in Las Vegas, where he had fled after a bank robbery in Phoenix. The FBI said Paddock tried to resist arrest and attempted to run down an agent with his car. That was reported in July 28, 1960, article in The Citizen. I believe that's Tucson Citizen? Yeah, the Tucson Daily Citizen. The FBI agents found nearly $3,000 and a loaded .38 caliber revolver in his car. So it's possible that maybe just everything that happened with his father played a big factor on his life and the type of person that this guy Stephen Paddock grew up to be, and then he committed this terrible act. Maybe it has to do with gambling debts, because he had recent large gambling transactions. This is according to multiple senior law officials and a casino executive, actually. These officials and the executive talk about how Stephen Paddock had gambled many times, come in and gambled upwards of $10,000 a day, but sometimes this could make its way up to as high as $30,000 that he could gamble away in a day. However, despite this, we do not know whether he won or lost when he made these bets, so it's possible that he lost everything, it's possible he won everything. I get the feeling, though, that the gambling nets are probably going to come around again, that this is going to be one of the big factors that we're going to figure out, that he gambled away his house or something like that. He was once a millionaire, but he gambled it all away and doesn't have it anymore. I have a feeling that's really where everything is. So the main weapon of choice in this attack was a fully automatic AR-15 rifle, assault rifle. This was illegally modified because an AR-15 is supposed to be a semi-automatic rifle. You can upgrade it to fully auto, but what he did was illegal, according to at least by state law. While cops did find upwards of 30 weapons from the casino all the way back to his place, he was really found with about a dozen weapons and thousands of rounds inside of his hotel room. But the type of weapons that he had suggested to law enforcement that he had actually passed an FBI background check in order to be able to achieve these weapons. So he clearly was never on any radar beforehand. And I mean, this has already been stated before, but this just proves it, showing how many weapons he had, the type of weapons he had, how much ammunition. So for this attack, he ended up using two types of caliber of bullet. He used a .308 and a .223 caliber. A .223 is a typical AR-15 round. That one is typically a smaller caliber round used for for small game hunting. And because of that, it'd be very restricted to going through more than one body. However, this 308 caliber is a heavy caliber bullet. This one is capable of going through multiple bodies. I think typically it's about 2 that they can typically pass through, but it's possible going through more. So this is very possible where many of the injuries came from. If he was using this heavier round that was good over a long range. And judging from how many injuries, how many deaths, I think he was probably typically shooting with this 308 caliber, but I could be wrong. But that's just what I assume from what I'm able to tell from this. Now, despite this night of horror, witnesses are telling a story of bravery about the first responders and some of the, well, I guess they're technically victims because they're still caught up in this shooting, but the bravery that they administered in order to assist others. So, of course, we got the cops who are, I've got a clip of an interview that was done with a witness in here. And he kind of talks about it, but we got these cops who are running towards a building, taking on a guy with a high-powered rifle while they're carrying these little pea shooter pistols. You know, you got to at least respect that, because that's a big disadvantage that they're running into, but they're prepared to do it. And we have countless of stories of people in the middle of being under fire that are stopping to assist those that are injured and trying to get them to safety, whether pulling them behind some cover or trying to stop the bleeding from their open wound. There's just some amazing stories. Despite the horror and all the bad that happened, there's some amazing stories of what happened that came out from that day.
Let's talk about the heroes that you saw last night.
In a world where everyone's kneeling, I saw hundreds of people standing up and running towards the danger. You know, I mean, these first responders. The second you heard, I just can't believe I didn't know what to do in this scenario. And then there are these, you know, individuals who are obviously trained really well, running towards automatic gunfire with nothing but a pistol on their sidearm. I mean, like, who does that? It's just. See, I mean, every distraction that those cops gave that guy saved countless lives. I mean, he was just spraying the crowd. Every single time that trigger was pulled, multiple people were hit. Barricades and using the barricades as like gurneys and stretchers, taking 2-3 bodies out at a time, just dragging them, just trying to get people under cover. I mean, there were 6 people in a porta potty at a time, and all the porta potties were locked. We were like mice in a cage, or mice in a maze. We just couldn't get out. I mean, you finally think you were out to an exit, and then it'd be a dead end with a 10-foot wall. So you'd have to double back through thousands of people and try to get out. And my poor fiance, her knees are all torn up, and I mean, she's finally asleep right now. I haven't had a chance to sleep yet. It's just it's images in your head, and I just had to wake her up from a nightmare and tell her, you know, we're home. It's okay. It's over. Actually, one of your producers called us. I had to wake her up and apologize.
Oh, well,
this is going to stick with you forever.
Now, finally, the conspiracy theories are already going around as to what happened. And one of the big ones that I've already stumbled on is that the theory is that there is, in fact, 2 shooters, and that the second one is on the 4th floor. I've also heard a couple people that said that just the shooting came from the 4th floor. But generally, when I'm looking at these conspiracies, they're saying that there's 2 shooters firing, one from the 2nd floor. And there's one of the videos that I found, a couple of them actually, that I've put into the links below. It does show what appears to be gunfire coming from there. And I took a good long time looking at this video, but in the end, I'm not convinced.
Oh shit, Alright, I'm out of here. Like it's coming from up there. Oh shit, Right
there, baby.
That's the
4th floor,
gunfire.
not the 32nd. This is right
one
there.
more time.
And notice the sound is off with the light because he's filming from a throw distance.
And we're going to look through it for a few different reasons. Well, first off here, I have a map of Mandalay Bay and the music festival. As we can see here in the bottom center is we got the Mandalay Bay, and we got the three mandibles, I guess you could call them, coming out. And then we got the music festival across the street. Not very far. So I ended up going on Google Maps, and I ended up pulling this up. Google Earth, sorry. Ended up just pulling up some images from around there. So as we can see, this one on the top left is just... I got better pictures, don't worry. These are not what we're limited to. So as we can see here on the top left is just a basic... is just the full view from Mandalay Bay all the way to the concert. And then we got a close-up of... On the top right, we got a close-up of the concert area, and then bottom picture, we got a close-up of Mandalay Bay, at least at the bottom. Just sort of giving you a grasp, an image of how this shooting took place. So, in this photo, I've decided I wanted to make it look a little more like how it took place. This whole thing took place just a little after 10, so I set the time just a little bit after 10. And then I took the measurements for how far of a shot this would be. So I had to take it in a triangular pattern, as you can see. So this bottom right-hand dot was just the very bottom of Mandalay Bay, and the top was about the 32nd floor. I got in close, and I zoomed in close, and I counted, and I'm pretty sure that's about right. And then we have about where the center of the crowd would be at the stage. So we're looking at about 436 meters. I'm not sure exactly what the conversion is, but I'm pretty sure it's well over 1,300 feet long. So that's what we're looking. That's how far of a path he would have had to shoot. And then he's got a pretty good trajectory from the top down, being able to see people. Couple different ones. Here's a closer up of where the shooting would take place, and again a little bit closer up at the concert area. In this one, I just trying to give as much of a view from that hotel as possible. Of course, it's rough because I can only do so much with the computer, but we can see he's got a pretty good view of everybody in there. That if he was shooting from this position, this would actually be a good position to take. And then we just a little bit of a better image during the daytime, just to make it a little easier. Now, in this image, and over the next couple ones, as we'll see, what I've done is there's two lines, as you can see. The red one is the shooter from the 32nd floor, and then the yellow one is the shooter from the the fourth floor. That shooter on the fourth floor, if that's where one was, if that's where the shooter was, I'm not convinced. That's a very shallow angle that he has to shoot. And if we look at the other ones from the concert hall, you really would not be able to see much of people over there. So shooting from the fourth floor would not be ideal if you wanted to shoot across the street. Shooting from the 32nd would be way superior. And again, if we're just looking at here the view from about the fourth floor, it's not as good as the 32nd floor. So for that reason alone, it makes more sense to go up higher than even to stay there. Now, and then the other thing that's everyone's pointing to is they're showing that there's this light that's flashing in the videos. They even acknowledge in the videos that the sound is off with the light, that it's if the gunfire doesn't match up with how the light is flashing. Although they believe this had more to do with the distance in between, the distance between when the video was being taken and where the person was shooting. But it doesn't work for a couple of reasons. One, because the light continues flashing after the gunfire has stopped. This should be reverse according to physics, because light travels faster than sound, so the light should stop flashing before the sound of gunfire stops. This is not what happens. The second reason is because the light continues flashing. If you watch closely in the videos, the light continues flashing for after several seconds since the gunfire has stopped, and even more. There's still a tiny light flashing where it appears that there is gunfire. And we're going to watch inside this video right now. I've paused it and highlighted where this light is in key areas in here. So off this first video, this first picture, I've highlighted where the flashing light is going to come from. I've highlighted where the flashing light is going to come from, and this red arrow underneath that's highlighting is just highlighting a light. I'm just highlighting the light right now. It's just a pure light that's on, just as a reference marker of where you need to look for this. So if you look just above this red arrow, I've identified a single light. You look just above it, and we have the white circle I've identified. The flashing light is coming from right in between there. So if we move on in the video, we can see the light is continuing to flash right here. Here it is flashing again. And finally, our gunfire has stopped. Yet, this light is still flashing. And now our gunfire has stopped for several seconds. And the light is still flashing. This is why the fourth floor theory doesn't work out for me, is this light continues on flashing. Once you locate and identify it, you can see that it just keeps flashing regardless whether there's gunfire or not. That being said, I looked hard in the video and I could not see the shooter from the 32nd floor. I looked hard, but I couldn't find it. The other reason that these conspiracy theories are pointing to is they're saying that there sounds like there's an overlapping of gunfire, that there's two guns going off at once. And if we listen to the video, it does kind of sound like overlap. Like the gunfire does actually sound like there is gunfire going one over the other. However, when you contrast this to other videos of people shooting AR-15s and other weapons, you realize that it's not two weapons, two automatic rifles overlapping with each other, but it is the initial gunfire and the echo coming from the other gunshots that are actually making that overlapping sound. And you can tell because I pulled up another video of US Marines in a gunfight with Taliban in Afghanistan, and in it you can hear a couple times where the gunfire overlaps as we have multiple rifles firing at the same time, and then there's some times where you hear one rifle firing, but because of the echo it sounds like there's more than one rifle being fired.
Dude, fuck that guy. Why is he... Hey, right there!
So I don't begrudge the conspirators for coming up with this theory, because it nearly pulled me in too. I was quite convinced when I saw this flashing light inside the videos. But all in all, it doesn't add up, because that light keeps flashing regardless whether there's gunfire or no gunfire. the angle of the shot from the 4th floor would not be good. Even if you had there were 2 shooters, which inside the police scan, if you listen to the audio from the police scanners, they do believe at one point there was at least multiple shooters. To put that second shooter on the 4th floor wouldn't be ideal if you were trying to get those shots off. If you were actually trying to kill people across the street, some 400 meters away. And then once I watched the video with the Marine gunfire and how it was sounding, and a few other videos of gunfire, it didn't work for me. It did not add up. So what did leave this man, Stephen Paddock, who seemed to have a good life, a life of luxury, a life of wealth? What leads a man like this to then pick up dozens of weapons, thousands of rounds of ammunition, and go slaughter people at a concert that are just trying to have a good time? It wasn't for any political message, as far as we can tell. It hasn't been for any religious message. So why? There have been some theories that there was anti-fascist material found inside his hotel room, that he was a far lefty, but as far as I can tell, this is fake news. I have not really been able to find much to back that up. I'm probably going to keep looking into that in the time being, and if I find anything, I'll probably address it in my next video. But for right now, I honestly don't know why this guy did what he did. It's a shame that 59 people had to die and 527 had to be injured because as far as I could tell, he was having a bad day. Well, that's it for this episode. I'm Adrian Lloyd. This is just my stupid opinion. I'll see you soon.
You profit from fear and